All right, Jake. Thanks for zooming with me here. So I
Absolutely.
thought I thought we'd just talk about coal mining, which I know is one of your favorite topics. I mean, you write a lot about coal mining history, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Love talking about this, love sharing stories and yeah, separately kind of been in the weeds with some of these folklore accounts from the anthracite region of eastern Pennsylvania. So, yeah, getting myself a little better versed in folklore, which also includes a lot of ghost stories when it comes to mining.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, so it's that time of year, and I do some ghost tours, and I came across a few coal mining stories, and I thought I would basically just pick your brain and we could read these together.
Sounds good.
So here we go. So it's mostly just newspaper coverage. Uh, and this first one is in the Pittsburgh paper in 1872, the Pittsburgh Commercial, but it is quoting the Scranton Republican. So they're just passing along these stories as they do. All right, so this one's pretty short. It just says, according to the Scranton Republican, the miners of the Bellevue shaft have a veritable ghost in their mine. The ghost is represented as being about 6 feet high, composed of white, thin, vapory substance, and moves about through the chambers, appearing first to one gang of men and then to another. Pistols have been fired at him, and although many shots have passed through him, yet he seems invulnerable to pistol balls. He has frightened the mules, driven men from their chambers, threatened individual persons, and produced a general consternation among the workmen. All attempts to catch him have proved abortive, and he is getting to be a decided nuisance. Interesting one. What are
Interesting.
your thoughts?
Yeah, this is the second account, second ghost story I've come across recently where they are shooting at the ghost. So
hmm
that's always a fun touch. When was this particular story from?
This was April 19th, 1872.
1872. Okay.
hmm
Yeah. So yeah, the Bellevue mine was just working on a story about this as well. Is in the city of Scranton. So Scranton, Pennsylvania. You may know it from The Office, but has a long mining history that goes back well into the 19th century. The Bellevue mine is one of the mines that opens in the mid 19th century in Scranton. It's one of the most worked out mines in that region. So they're mining there for a very long time. And yeah, so this is a story from the eastern part of the state. And one of the things that I came across as we were preparing to do this video, I kind of dove back into the folklore accounts collected by a man by the name of George Corson. George Corson grew up in the Wilkes-Barre area of Pennsylvania, so not too far from Scranton, and worked as a newspaper reporter in both Wilkes-Barre and in Pottsville, Pennsylvania, which Matt, you and I were just there recently.
Yeah.
And he, starting in the 1920s, started collecting a lot of these kinds of stories. And one of the things that he noted, he wrote this in a book that he published in 1938, kind of a collection of folklore stories. And he said, quote, in the anthracite industry, unknown sounds were always associated with ghosts, especially the ghosts of miners who had been killed while at work. Most of the ghosts were cripples who lacked limbs, which had been blasted away. So there is in the Eastern mines, especially, it seems like they're quite a superstitious lot. And so there are a lot of accounts and stories, and just about every mine had its own account like this. Whether it's seeing things, hearing things, it makes sense. These guys are down in the dark for
hmm
a very long time. That can mess with your mind for sure. And I'm sure we'll hear that in some of these other stories as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're in the dark, you're underground. I mean, it's dangerous work. So it has all the elements that you need. I mean, disasters, violent death. And so a lot of ghost stories that I come across or folklore stuff is some kind of violent death, or murder or something like that. And some of these coal mining stories actually have a murder as well.
Hmm.
So, all right, we'll go to the next one. That's thanks for putting us in the right part of Pennsylvania there.
Yep.
So let's get it. This next one is the Scranton Times, October 26th, 1895. It's titled Ghosts in a Coal Mine. So, reporting from Hazleton, PA, October 21st, the mining village of Germantown, located on the mountain between Centralia and Locust Dale, is greatly worked up over alleged spiritual manifestations in the coal mine there. Patrick Shea, Victor Docherty, and Thomas Durkin have been employed there since the slope was sunk 30 years ago. They entered the works last night as usual while Docherty was preparing to drill a hole. The bar was taken from his hands and thrown away. The powder, which he had arranged, was scattered about the breast and then ignited. The flame which it created filled the place with a phosphorescent glare which clung to the walls and face, and Mr. Docherty fled from the place in terror. As he reached the gangway shouting wildly, his comrades hastened to his assistance. While they stood about him, an apparition suddenly appeared on the gangway. The opening was transformed into a fairyland in forms flinted about. The dark recesses were illuminated, spirits manifested themselves, and the black diamonds shone brilliantly. Cars were moved by invisible hands, and doors were swung open. Even the mule ran to a place of safety. There's one more paragraph here. The miners were so excited that they fled from the place in terror. They appeared, they spread the alarm, and the entire village was soon roused. Old Michael Lonzer, who is the town doctor, refused to prescribe for the men, declaring that they were moved by supernatural powers and he was helpless. A legend has it that Germantown mine is haunted. Years ago, a cave-in occurred there, and the Moyer family, 13 in number, were buried under the debris, and it is concluded that their disturbed spirits are still wandering in the darkness. The colliery will not be worked tomorrow. So excuse my reading there, but you got the gist of it.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting to me. The first thing I thought of is just how much a game of telephone that story is. So you mentioned Scranton newspaper publishing a story from Hazleton,
Mhm.
and then the story comes from near Centralia, and so these are all kind of scattered, a couple dozen miles in between each location. I'm sure that the story kind of morphed a little bit there over time, but there's a commonality between many of these anthracite mining stories, and that is, you already mentioned that, which is the connection to violent death. um, the fact that violent death in the 19th century, especially for these mine workers and their families, is an ever-present threat. Violent death is just at any point could be seconds away, whether that's the roof caving in, whether it's poisonous gas, whether it's suddenly hitting water. There are many ways to be killed or seriously injured while on the job in these mines, in especially the 19th century. But there are stories from the 20th century as well, and many of these stories, these ghost stories, are affiliated directly with that, with violent death, as you mentioned in that last story. So not a surprise there. Um, I will say I'm not familiar with the story of the Moyer family all being killed. I'll have to look into that legend a little bit deeper, but it is quite common in these mine disasters to have family members perishing, because many of these smaller mining communities, what are called patches, these little company owned villages in eastern Pennsylvania, many of these mines are worked by immigrant families, and so when you have them working in close proximity, if something does happen in the depths of the mine, in the darkness, oftentimes these family members will be working alongside each other all day. And if something should happen, a disaster, the roof caving in, an explosion, a fire, um, these men will be killed together. And so that kind of family connection, and the loss potentially of entire families or groups of families in these mine disasters is unfortunately quite common in the region.
Yeah, for sure. And then just the description of mining there with the drilling the hole and things going wrong and flames. It could just seem like an accident there, and they're trying to process the accident, what's going on.
Yeah, and what's interesting, I've encountered other stories about particular so different kinds of gas within mines. Some of it, they have different names for it. Carbon monoxide, because you're setting off explosives. There's fire, carbon dioxide as well from both from the breathing of miners. If the air is poor, that carbon dioxide can collect. There's also
Mhm.
methane, as well as some dust in the air. Dust is less common in the anthracite region than it is in the bituminous region in western Pennsylvania. Western Pennsylvania is where you get these massive dust explosions, or in West Virginia. Some of those have happened in the 21st century. But in the East, it's really like these methane pockets that can gather. And what's interesting is in some of these more kind of, they were referred to as gassy mines, where kind of leach into the air, coming through these different veins of coal and coming out and collecting. I've read stories about some of these guys with safety lamps on, or with flames, where it would do crazy things as that gas is burning off. Even if it's just collected in small pockets, it will do crazy things, kind of like what they describe. So it sounds a
Yeah,
little bit like it's probably some natural phenomenon that
yeah,
in this mine that already has this story of death associated with it, working down there for hours and hours, days upon days in the dark. These guys sounds like their imaginations may have gotten the best of them down there.
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I couldn't imagine having a work incident like that, nearly blowing up, I guess, and seeing just weird, mysterious fire, and then someone saying, "Well, the whole family, the Moyers did die down there last, you know, 10 years ago," and you just
Mm-hmm.
kind of putting that all together, like, so it makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. And then I thought the last point, there will not work tomorrow. So it seems to be a little bit of a theme of you know, working maybe striking or maybe labor. Another one that we'll read kind of brings that up too. So let's see. I don't know if it's the next one, but all right. That's fascinating. So you were mentioning like the different gases, the white damp, I've heard that there's different names, like you said. I was
Mm-hmm.
reading a story about in Center County,
Mm-hmm.
and it was in Phillipsburg. It was because Center County is mostly not coal mine region, but on the northwest edge of Center County, Clearfield,
Mm-hmm.
near Clearfield, Phillipsburg and Snowshoe has a good amount of, or a lot of bituminous coal mining history. And there was this random story I came across that it was a closed mine, and the owner and a couple guys went in there, and unfortunately they experienced the white damp, and
Mm-hmm.
they collapsed, and they by the time they got them out of there, they were gone, but they were just kind of
Mm-hmm.
checking on it, and it was just one of those unfortunate things. All right, this is a short one. So this is in 1898 in Neshonoc, might be saying that wrong, Neshonoc, Pennsylvania, and it's related to a murder. So in Neshonoc has a haunted coal mine. A coal miner takes his pick and lamp, goes into the mine, works busily, emerges about daylight, and vanishes. Years ago, Elijah Bowaker, a miner, disappeared there, and it was thought he was murdered. And that was reported in that newspaper in Ebensburg, Pennsylvania, in Salisbury, Elk Lick, Pennsylvania, in Pittsburgh and Punxsutawney, all the same week or two. So
Wow.
yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. Again, the theme of violent death is kind of ever present in these particular stories.
All right. And then let's see. I have the Taylor mine in 1906, but this is at a Scranton paper
Mhm.
in 1906, November 1906. So, Ghosts visits mine. Some report the workings are too near Hades for safety. A great deal of consternation is being caused among the miners in the Taylor mine of the Delaware and Hudson Company over a haunted chamber. Some of the men at work in the mine, it is claimed, saw a hollow-eyed, white-robed, luminiferous form of a man bearing a light that had no flicker, which vanished quickly from sight. The ghost is a lazy one, for it never is caught working. Also, it is man-fearing because it disappears in the air upon one's approach. So much faith do the men place in the report that some of them shrink with terror at the thought of approaching that portion of the mine where the ghost made its appearance. John Bowenski, it is said, is the miner who first saw the specter, and he immediately told of his experience to the other workmen. The miners now won't mine. The plausibility of the miner's story created much anxiety on the part of the other miners to see the ghost, and a number of them stationed themselves at the place close to where the human form was seen. It was not long before the supposed spirit moved forward, and after circling a ring, it disappeared. The doubtful ones, convinced, fled in terror. Those who don't believe in the ghost are invited, it is said, to a ghost party, which is being arranged for.
Hmm. What's interesting there, so the Taylor mine is not far from Bellevue, that we mentioned in the first story. So interesting that these adjacent mines have stories related, from just a couple years apart. That's quite interesting. Got some superstitious guys working down there.
Yeah, absolutely. And then again, impacting work, impacting, um, people wanting to go down there or not. And so,
Yeah, that's
yeah,
another thing I'd say from reading Corson's work about some of the folklore. Another element of the stories that he came across from all over the region, the anthracite region, is that there is that like walking off the job element of these stories. It's actually quite
mhm,
common. What would happen in the event of an accident? Management would actually try to prevent the story of if someone was killed in, let's say, a minor scale accident or a roof collapse. Something happens, they're severely injured or killed. Um, a lot of the other workers would leave, and in part because of the feeling that of spirits in the mine, danger to them, solidarity with their lost, comrade, if you will, fellow workers. Um, so management would actually try to hide these smaller accidents from the rest of the workers. Again, these are tunnels stretching miles underground. But Corson always said that these stories that he heard always, there was always like this grapevine that went through these working mines where word was passed from one person to the next, working in these gangways and these breasts deep within the mine, and these guys would leave in the event of an accident, in part because of that kind of little bit of feeling of you don't want to be in this mine where someone was just killed, kind of the spooky side of it, but also too in solidarity with their fellow worker.
yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, it's a hard enough day without that stuff
Mm-hmm.
going on. So, absolutely. All right, I think I just have a couple more. I'm sure there's tons of these, but
Yeah.
these are just some ones I wanted to look at with you. So,
Mm-hmm.
and it's really cool to hear your insights because I read a lot of your blog, You're from the, Eastern PA or, Pottsville area. And it's just, it's neat to pick your brain here. So, this one's in 1913. It is the Forest Republican in Tionesta, Pennsylvania. And it says, it's called Miners Fear Ghost. An alleged wraith scares men from work in the coal area. Men rush from the mines with stories of an apparition, half man, half beast, carrying a luminous dinner pail and going from room to room ordering them to quit work. The men are reported to have dropped tools and fled. The wraith took possession of the motor, ordered its driver to depart, and then took the trip of loaded coal cars to the pit mouth. On arriving outside, however, the trip was discovered by the tipple crew to be without its motorman. So he also took possession of the coal car in 1913. So that's an interesting one.
Yeah. Yeah. That sounds yeah, a bit frightening to have all these loaded coal cars flying around by themselves.
Yeah, that's probably the most frightening part.
Yeah.
Yeah. That and the half man, half beast and carrying a dinner pail, I guess. I don't know. That's
Yeah.
that's interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see here. I was trying to stick in Pennsylvania, but I thought this one was interesting. Um, so it's a specific person's ghost.
Hmm.
So Martin Farron's ghost in 1892. This was reported. A Welton policeman says he has seen it twice. So in Wellston, Ohio, Isaac Brown, night policeman, reports a very peculiar ghost story. He says for 2 nights he has seen the ghost of little Martin Farron, who was killed by the cars last week, wandering around the tipple at Wellston number 2 coal mine. The spirit flits about the cars and through the timber work, and Mr. Brown says the features of the boy are plainly discernible. Saturday night, he says he pursued the strange being. When he walked fast, so did the ghost, and when he walked slow, the ghost did likewise. He pursued it up Second Street as far as the undertaking establishment of such and such. There it disappeared behind the building and was lost to view. The affair has caused quite a ripple of excitement among our people.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah. That one's an interesting one. And just because of the name, the fact that it's associated with a person, um, specifically, is one that I find that, yeah, I found that one kind of moving. It also doesn't, you know, the fact that it's a young person, that it's a kid, working around the mines, killed by the cars. It's kind of a, yeah, adds a, yeah,
yeah,
somber note to that. I mean, all of these kind of have a somber note to them, but
yeah,
that one in particular.
yeah, I agree. That one definitely struck me as well. Um, and the fact that he recognized the boy.
Mm.
And yeah, I mean, even in the, so this is 1892, but would you say even in the 1900s, you're
Mm-hmm.
seeing still a lot of young kids working
Mm-hmm.
in the mines? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. There are laws passed in. I can't speak. That story was from Ohio, right?
Yeah, that was Ohio. Yeah.
I can't speak to Ohio law, but Pennsylvania starts putting laws on the books starting in the 1870s and then again in the 1880s about children working in the in mining environment specifically. There are many workarounds to those laws, so you still have kids as young as 8, 9, 10 that are doing work around the mines well into the early 20th century. There's a movement in the 1910, 1911, 1912. There's a national committee, National Child Labor Committee, that is doing work to expose these companies and the families of these young workers for how they skirted that work, had that those rules, to allow their children to lie about their age so that they could find work and employment in the mines, because it was necessary for these large families to be able to have these these kids at work to make ends meet. So it's both a story from like the the management of the mine of like paying starvation wages, but then
Hmm.
also the families themselves being involved in that system. So it was kind of like a little bit of blame to go around
Yeah, right.
for that practice.
Kind of a vicious cycle where you're
Yeah.
kind of in a pickle where you're in that situation. And yeah, it seemed like in a lot of the photos you look at, it seems like it's probably the dad and the son, or the dad and his
Mm-hmm.
nephew, those pictures of, 14-year-old miners, or whatever. Um, there was a story I came across in Phillipsburg as well about a foreman's son being killed in a coal car, in a collapse. And he was in charge, running the cars, I guess. And it was the foreman's, 14-year-old,
Mm-hmm.
15-year-old son. And so I was like, wow, it's a tough time. And so
Mm-hmm.
I tell my students, I actually share some of these stories with my students in high school. And I'm like, this is easy, guys. You're sitting in a classroom, it's air conditioned. You can go to lunch with your friends. You can goof around. I was like, you do not want to be in, 1911 coal mining Pennsylvania with no child labor laws. This is really easy. And
Yeah.
I actually read that specific story about the foreman's son. So, it really hits you.
Indeed. I find, yeah, the stories of as they're known in the anthracite region, the Breaker Boys, the kids that worked in kind of the big processing building, that going back to the 19th century were as young as 8 years old, and that their lives would be spent forever working in the mining industry. If they were fortunate, they get to be 13 or 14 and they get to go down in the mine and work as a door boy, opening doors to make sure the proper ventilation is occurring in the mine, or driving mules. And then they're going to start working as a laborer. Then, if they're fortunate, be able to train as a miner, which was kind of the skilled position. But then there was always any accident, anything that happens to them as they get older, things like black lung come into play, or rheumatism from working so hard all their lives. They get to be 40, 50 years old and their bodies are breaking down, and suddenly they're going back to the breaker, and the cycle completes with them ending where they started back in the breaker is broken down. Um, old mine workers coughing up black soot out of their lungs, and what will ultimately likely kill them. I just find these stories so, on the one hand, it's very depressing, that's the life cycle of these, thousands of young people that are going to be subjected to that. But there's also something that's so, I don't know, it resonates in that story. And then to know that these are the guys too that are going to talking about labor, that eventually this cycle becomes, something that these men want to fix, and find ways to improve their situation, improve the life and the employment, lessen the danger, raise the pay for these workers, and they are going to fight for it, and create unions and try to make their lives a little less hard scrabble and dangerous, and find ways to make a real living in doing this work that drives the industrial revolution, and creates a modern America, creates the American century in the 20th century. Really starts with these kids, and then those kids grow up to be those mine workers that are going to unionize and create the United Mine Workers of America. And
Mm.
really, like I said, create kind of that modern America and the American century. So, off of ghost stories, get off my
Yeah,
my
I love that. I
soapbox
love that.
here.
No, that's exactly what I wanted, Jake. That was that. That's great. Yeah, it's these hard lessons are important to reflect upon, read the
Mhm.
primary sources, look at those photographs. I was thinking of the Lewis Hine
Yep.
photographs. You know, history's so important to deal with those hard, uncomfortable things,
Hmm.
um, and see where we've come from, and to honor those people too. I just think about, like, just even just I don't know what if it does much, but just me thinking about them or looking at their picture and caring or trying to humanize, or trying to empathize with how, how I would perform in that
Mhm.
situation. So I don't know, you know, that's how I try to look at things, but hopefully that's a sign of respect for
Mhm.
those people in the coal mines because they sure worked hard.
Absolutely.
Um, So yeah, so I really no these were it was really fun to talk to you because or fun's not a great word for it, but I have I have fun doing this kind of stuff. It's
Mhm.
fun talking history, especially with you, my friend, and I know your experience with this kind of stuff is vast. I mean, I literally am picking your brain. I do not understand coal mining in the level that you do, so appreciate that, Jake.
Yeah, happy to be here. Happy to share some stories, and yeah, look forward to sharing more of these in the future.
Sounds good. Enjoy the Halloween season.
You too. I'm going to be spending it reading more of these ghost stories from the anthracite region. So
Sounds
you're
good.
prompting me to look some of these up. Has turned over some really interesting stories. So definitely stay tuned to winninghistory.com, which is my blog for more of these stories because I'm going to be putting some of them online that way as well.
Sweet. Looking forward to reading those.